So, a couple of things we have here. I have to find this. We want to thank one of our sponsors is Perkins Coie. It's a leading American law, AmLaw 550 firm with a first mover and global thought leader in the blockchain space and has been advising most of the founding actors since their initial market entries in 2012. Their interdisciplinary team works with over 300 blockchain clients, guiding them through regulatory questions and challenges. They regularly address a range of concerns related to cryptocurrency and blockchain in the financial sector and support clients in all aspects of domestic and cross-border finance and commodity and derivatives trading compliance programs. Their attorneys are committed to helping ensure that each client receives a superior service and benefit from their vast legal and sector experience. We have Michael Hansen from, if you'd raise your hand. There he is. So he's one of the partners at Perkins Coie. So our next panel is, as new blockchain-based solutions are being developed and proposed by governments, enterprises, and individuals, how will they know which solutions can be trusted? It's an uncomfortable fact that there have been many failed blockchain projects in the financial service industries, and many financial services have failed to meet expectations. Our next panel is going to address this topic as they're going to discuss how to build, assure, and demonstrate a blockchain solution that can be trusted in the financial service industries. Gerard, you're going to be moderating it. Would you please introduce your panelists?
Oh, certainly. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Boy, this is a great privilege because I have two people next to me. First of all, it is an incredible privilege looking out in the audience because we have some amazing people here in this room. And I'd like to thank you guys all for coming. We've heard a lot of compliments so far, but it's you guys that bring the value to this event and the value that you bring to each other. So I'm extremely grateful to you guys for coming. And Aristotle, you did a great job this morning. So yeah, I would like to introduce these two gentlemen. Dino, and I always butcher your last name, Dell'Accio, Cataldo Dell'Accio. Dell'Accio, perfect. Dino is the Chief Information Officer of the United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund. He's also the Digital Transformation Lead for the lead for the Digital Transformation Working Group of the United Nations. I've had the pleasure of getting to know him over the last couple of years, and I believe he is brilliant. He has incredible ethics, and is really a leader and an innovator in his space. Test. Okay, can you hear me better now? All right. Paul F. Dowding is a gentleman who spent 35 years in the financial services with banks, BNY Mellon, Bank of America, I think Chase Manhattan. I've almost got your resume memorized. And he saw a lot of problems in that space and identified all the problems and thought that blockchain potentially would be a solution. And I'll let him tell you a little bit about his journey in that. Dino, when the United Nations had a particular challenge with COVID coming, they had to find some solutions, and Dino and an incredible team at the United Nations just did some amazing work, and you'll learn a little bit more about that. But what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of them to kind of tell their story about how do they go about assessing blockchain solutions. Dino in terms of the Joint Staff Pension Fund, and Paul in terms of banking. So let me throw it over to you first, Dino. Tell us your journey in terms of assessing blockchain solutions.
Thank you, Gerard. So very briefly, in 2018, 2019, at the pension fund, we started to tackle an issue that the pension fund had been facing for over 70 years. And this pertained to the fact that the fund did not have a very reliable way to confirm that its 84,000 pensioners, retirees, and beneficiaries residing in 195 countries were still alive. For 70 years, this process of proof of existence was conducted by the use of a piece of paper, a form, that once a year was mailed to 84,000 people in 190 countries through postal services, through 190 postal services, and returned back, signed by them as a proof of evidence that they were still alive. As you can appreciate, this method was always questioned by governing bodies, by oversight bodies, as to how can you prove that there is no fraud. And of course, proving a negative is impossible. And therefore, in 2020, under the leadership of my Chief Executive Officer, who is here in the audience today, Ms. Rosemary McLean, we started a project looking at innovative technologies. And we came up with a solution that married the biometrics facial recognition with a distributed ledger based on blockchain to create an app that now each of our 84,000 clients can download on their phone, be enrolled, and we are doing now once a year simply because we have been using a paper-based process. But now the system can be used even more frequently, such as once a month before they receive payment. They can indeed confirm they're still alive. Now, my background is actually in IT auditing. So I brought this professional deformation, if you will, with me when I became CIO. So one of the first question or dilemma that I had, great, we have designed and implemented an innovative solution that works. Indeed, it went live in January 2021. How can we now demonstrate that it's reliable, that is secure, that is private, that keeps information confidential, that maintains integrity, and so forth and so on. And based on my background, one of the first entity that I looked for, also because working for the United Nations, always look at the international type of standard, was the ISO standard organization. And when I inquired with them, at that time, and I believe still today, they were still defining the vocabulary of blockchain. So there was not yet, and there is, I believe, today, not yet the standard for certification or for validation of blockchain-based solution. And that's in my quest to find general accepted standard, best practices. I came across GBA and Gerard and the team, and I start collaborating with them in identifying maybe not necessarily a rigorous certification schema, but at least some sort of a structured criteria that could help myself and my organization and the team to demonstrate that indeed in designing, implementing and maintaining a solution, we actually complying with best practices that can be independently audited, reviewed, assessed by third parties. And that's basically my journey in pursuing, if you will, an activity that is not yet complete because there is an evolution, because there are new technology that are also a new risk, a new security concern that, of course, become present every day. But I have to say that through the work of the GBA, and specifically its main deliverable, which is the blockchain maturity model, we have been able to identify a set of best practices and requirements that are technologically neutral and therefore can be applied to any type of solution, regardless to whether you're using Hyperledger or using Ethereum or using another type of platform. And therefore try to really go to the essence of what are the potential risks and what are the potential mitigating controls that an organization can prove to have in place in order to provide assurance about the reliability of a blockchain-based solution.
Thank you, Dino. And we're going to come back in a minute to that evaluation as you're looking at your own solution. I want to throw it over to Paul. Paul, tell us your journey, right? It's a very extensive one, but tell us your journey about how you came to the point where you were using the BMM to assess your solution.
My career actually started as an engineer. I like to say my degree's in aeronautics and astronautics, so I can actually say what rocket science is. Went into manufacturing and then transitioned, this is in the 80s when technology was taken over, to banking operations. So I've worked in the infrastructure of the industry from a management perspective, from a product management perspective, and strategy and innovation. And I've gone through sort of custody, securities lending, private wealth, prime brokerage, supporting trading groups, and working in that field and trying to make the infrastructure of the industry work better and more flexibly. I'd also worked with internalizing trades within an organization to make them simpler, and that's when I first got, someone put something in front of me that said, there's blockchain. And this is about 2014, 2015. And it seems like they'd read The Random Walk on Wall Street on one side, and then it was this blockchain. It was pixie dust and unicorns, and I didn't know what it was. I then spun into a boutique consultancy, and they said, "Do you know anything about this blockchain? Because we're getting client inquiries about it." And I said, "Well, I kind of scratched the surface, but let's take a look." So now we delve into it, and blockchain is often seen as a technology solution. It's really an operational and process control solution. And when we looked at it from that perspective, we saw that while the potential is huge, this can become a transaction protocol for the world, like TCP/IP. Make transactions as simple as communicating. But we saw that the other products, the products that were out there, lacked scale, they lacked speed, they couldn't handle the volume, and surprising is ledgers didn't have actually any accounting. And when you're dealing with financing and payable receivables, that's a critical element. So that led me into my blockchain journey and what led to the design of our protocol called Tapestry X. At the early stages of this process, where I'd sort of come up for the framework, I go to New York to see a first-time presentation by some guy called Gerard Dache saying, "This is the Government Blockchain Association, and I'm here to, because governments are notoriously difficult to deal with, and they're slow adopters of technology." And I thought, okay, this is someone I can get behind. What he didn't like was me coming up to him and say, these blockchains don't scale. They're going to have trouble. They're not going to really work. And so he didn't like me initially, I think. But over
I've always liked you, Paul. I just didn't like what you were saying.
Actually, Gerard could never not like anybody, but let's just say he walked away from me a couple of times. But over time, what I was telling him was, what I'm worried about is there's huge potential here. And what we want to do is filter out, the not quite there solutions, and don't give a bad reputation because some of them are failing. And as I got involved with the GBA, as one does with Gerard, that you find yourself attending one event, and next thing you're doing, you're spending hours every Saturday morning working on a BMM standard. So
I have been referred to as a black hole.
So, but it was within the working groups, the standards and certification group, and I could get behind this because it was really going to assess. And as much as I was a critic of some of the solutions, I began to realize, and certainly through my participation in, and Eugene can attest to this, he's a public blockchain, I'm a private permission one. We used to lock heads, now we hold arms. We recognize each other's benefits, and there's certain use cases where these blockchains apply, but it's a matter of finding where do you fit and what do you need as a solution buyer. So in perspective of Kyle's last recommendation, if you want real-time accounting and you don't want any exceptions to process, that's what Tapestry X can do for you. So that's my pitch. But what we led to was this process of defining a standard. And I'll give Gerard credit for framing the documentation and the professionalism of how it's come out. But the group was constantly stepping back and saying, are we applying this to the public blockchains, the private permission, the different protocols, the different methods of consensus or synchronization? How do we define that? And even though I may be conflicted with a protocol to promote, but I was trying to retain an objectivity because this is going to be a tool for the industry, and then both to promote the good solutions and to give the solution providers a perspective.
Thank you, Paul. So many of you may have seen the blockchain maturity model. There's copies of it floating around. It's important to understand that the blockchain maturity model identifies the 11 core elements of any blockchain solution. But what we realized along the way is that there's some industries that have additional requirements. So for example, if you're doing identity management in a banking financial services sector, you have to do AML KYC. But if you're doing it in, say, for voting and elections, you have to have permanent separability between the voter and the vote. So these gentlemen are both working on, or either are or have worked on supplements. One of the supplements is the banking and financial services supplement, which is why we're talking about that as part of this agreement. So we just recently completed an assessment of Paul's solution. And in addition to the 11 core elements of the blockchain maturity model, when we do an assessment of a financial services system, these are some of the things that we assess his solution for. Auditable records, credit risk and management transaction data, clearance and settlement, confidentiality, digital securities issuance, distributed settlement, double entry accounting, fractional reserve accounting, future data transactions, high capacity, tax lot accounting, transaction balances, third-party responsibility, scalability, real-time settlement, and lending, payables and receivables. So it was a 16-hour technology colonoscopy. And we really, and so Dino, you had an opportunity to be a part of that. I'd like to hear from your perspective what that process was like. And then Paul, I'd like to hear from your perspective what that process was like.
Thank you, Gerard. So a distinction that has been made is between two sets of documents. The primary document here is the model, the blockchain maturity model. And the second one, as Gerard just alluded to and read the details, is the supplement for banking and finance. So trying to put this into a perspective of, let's not use necessarily the word or the term auditor, but an assessor, is that if you are going to assess something, first and foremost, you need a criteria. You need the terms of reference. So in the world of auditing, please allow me to use this term in this instance. You have the five C's: criteria, condition, consequence, and cause, consequence, and corrective action. So the first point, the first step are the criteria that in this case were represented by the model, the high-level primary model that sets all the requirements against which you're going to conduct the assessment. But the beauty of the work that has been done within GBA is that there was a recognition that you cannot stop at the model and at the first C, because that it's relatively high level. As I mentioned before, as I alluded to before, it's technologic agnostic. It's also agnostic to in which environment you're going to use a blockchain. And therefore, if you move through the hierarchy of the C's, you end up going into the condition and the cause and the consequence basically is a synonym of the risk. And that is where you're forced to say, okay, but what could be the risk of using a blockchain in health environment? What could be the risk of using a blockchain in a voting? And in this case, what could be the risk of using a blockchain in support of finance and banking operation? And that's where the supplement came in, because it provided a structured and logical set of additional requirements that actually identified the potential risk that they could have been met and faced by an entity that offer a blockchain solution for a specific use case, which is in finance and banking. So the assessment went through this step-by-step process by first benchmarking, assessing the solution vis-a-vis the high-level model, and then went further, hence the challenging process of drilling down, not stopping at the high level. Are you aligned? Do you meet the expected requirement in privacy? Are you meeting the expected requirement in availability and continuity? But it actually goes further. What does it mean privacy in a banking and finance application? What does it mean continuity and availability and synchronization and settlement in a finance and banking solution? So at the end, after going through this test, the assessor, and I believe also the solution point of contact, this is the specific term used for the representative of the organization that has been assessed, really have an appreciation that you have done a comprehensive set of tests to reach a conclusion as to whether a solution is trusted or not. And if not, why, so that you can remediate, and if yes, how, so that you can demonstrate.
Thank you very much. Paul, tell us about your journey going through the process.
Again, just to explain some of the background, we're involved in the standards group, so we're working to prepare this standard, and we try to make sure that we're objective, so the participants, it doesn't look like we help create a standard that I'm now getting assessed against. And so I just add that that's a sort of very clear distinction. And so when we went through this review, I took the notes from Otter.ai and I fed them into ChatGPT, and I said, can you give me an image that represents my assessment. I think it's going to come up on the screen. So, that's my wife crying in the background, wondering what I was doing all last weekend. But so here I thought I was in a friendly audience because I'd worked with these guys to assess this standard. And foolishly, as part of the banking and finance group, we'd laid out 24 use cases and 23 requirements that are supplemental. Because although we talk about real-time settlement, that's needed in algorithmic execution or high-frequency trading. But if you're doing trade finance, you don't need real-time settlement. So some of the requirements don't apply to all use cases. But what I would say, so joking aside, was it was very thorough and professional. And I think Gerard's worked hard with the team to ensure that if anyone questions what's the process and the planning, and as we go through it, that it's objectively and ethically very sound. But that means, it's like, oh, I really have to prove this. You're not going to take my word for it. I've got to do my documentation and get everything else. But so although it was, exhausting, it was very rewarding. And part of what we were doing this for, and I'd add to this as well, is that we're training the assessors, because this is us doing it between ourselves right now to validate the process, and then so we can prove its validity, and also train the assessors so that if they're actually going to go out there and be professionally engaged to work with this standard, it shows that it is to a high standard. So yes, it was 16 hours, it was exhausting, not quite as bad as a colonoscopy, but although I was asleep in the colonoscopy, so I don't know. But they could accuse me of that as well. But no, it was a great process, and I would encourage you to look for this as a future standard, both as a solution provider and as a solution buyer.
Thank you, Paul. I do want to say a couple things real quick. One is for those of you that are interested in a blockchain career, right? Getting training, learning about the blockchain maturity model, becoming a consultant or an assessor is a great thing to do. If you're a solution provider and you want to understand what you need to do to create trusted blockchain solutions, it's a great thing to do. But Dino, I think I can say this, and if I oftentimes say things that I probably shouldn't and get in trouble for it, but I'm going to ask your permission. We haven't published it on the website yet, but Tapestry X is the very first blockchain financial services solution that has been assessed and rated by the GBA as a trusted blockchain solution. All right. And our goal is that if other folks have blockchain solutions that they would like to go through this process. Now, I have to tell you, we had lots of people saying, "Oh yeah, we want you to rate us, so we're probably level 5." Right? And we would start going through the requirements. I'm like, you're not even a level 1. You're not even like a level 0.25, because 75. Well, this is just my back of the napkin calculations. 75% of the projects between 2017 and 2022 have failed, and they failed because what a lot of people did was they came up with a great idea. They put together a pitch deck. They raised a lot of money. Right, they hired some developers and they started banging out code, and they wanted to sell their token or their project as soon as possible before the whole thing fell apart. And if we want this industry to survive, we've got to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And Paul was, the BMM didn't really do much for Paul, other than I think the work that you guys have done for the past several years. Right, it demonstrated that you're the real deal. Right?
Yeah, I would say, clarify, and I've said this, the levels in the assessment are level 1 is an idea, level 2 is a documented solution, level 3 is a proof of concept, level 4 is production, and level 5 is deployed, we call it optimizing, but deployed in multiple places. At the moment, the BMM is only doing the level 1 assessment of an idea, and obviously we're production ready. So our documentation and support was obviously, very thorough. So that helped me in terms of this process. But again, think about it. If you've got an idea and you can get an assessment on that idea, that's going to be an easier way for you to get, further justify the further documentation. Hopefully get investment to develop your solution and move through the stages. So Yeah.
Yeah, and I also say this is great for investors because if you're going to put your money into a project, you'd want to put it, like, for example, I don't know if you guys are looking for funding. I think you are. If some of your potential investors knew the process that you went through, it gives them additional confidence that, you know, because they don't want to throw their money away. Do you know, last minute and a half is yours.
Wow, what a responsibility. Oh, I had to say that what has worked very well is the fact that GBA is an association of like-minded people, professional, really brings together different backgrounds and different expertise. And when you start building terms of reference, benchmark, requirement model, whatever you want to call it, it really, the added value comes from the combined result of listening, the experiences and the point of views of people that come from finance, people that come from cybersecurity, people that come from the voting and the government sector, and that enriches the dialogue. And really, even if sometimes it's challenging because there are hard questions to be addressed and hard position, I think ultimately the result is very sound.
Thank you very much. It's been a great panel. Give these guys a hand.